Ready? Let's do this.
Let's do it.
All right, welcome back. This is session 2, lifelong learning. We're just gonna get right down to it.
Get right down to what?
Get down to it, yeah.
So we're going to share with you our case study, our personal stories of our own upbringings. But we thought we'd do something a little bit different where we're actually going to split up and do it kind of one-on-one. That way we're not awkwardly staring at each other during this whole session.
Yeah. So it's going to take some time to get through our stories, so bear with us. But as you listen to this case study, take notes, and we want you to walk away encouraged about just how unschooling can look during those teenage years, because we hear from a lot of parents, some of their concerns are those years. It's like they have more confidence in the early years of their children, but then are more concerned about the later years. What happens when they need to learn algebra and calculus, and it almost seems intimidating to unschool during those teenage years. And so we focus in our stories, a lot of it is focused on those years so that you can really get a picture of what that would look like.
We want you to walk away with confidence in those later years because you've already instilled a foundation of lifelong learning at a young age that will only grow with them.
Yeah, and so they'll know what to do. They know how to learn. So Keisha and I's stories overlap a lot because we grew up together. But my story starts early on. From the beginning, my parents homeschooled my siblings and I. And at the beginning, they took a more traditional homeschooling approach. They didn't know about unschooling. And so, they were just doing what they knew to do. And so we had, some curriculum and a room in our house set up as a classroom, and we would walk through each subject each day. But over time, they became more relaxed, my parents, and took a more organic approach over time. A lot of that was due to just because of our family dynamic. We traveled a lot. My dad is a missionary, and so we traveled all over the U.S. and all over the world. I took my first trip to Africa at age 11, Southeast Asia at age 12. Actually spent several summers in East Africa as a teenager, which I'll get into a little bit later. And so because of our family travel, we became more relaxed in our homeschooling as a kid. We spent a lot of time at libraries. As a kid, we'd go to the library. I'd spend whole days at the library and just get to research what we wanted, reading different books, using the computers. We'd go to museums and take lots of family field trips, to different museums, and grew up in Virginia. And so just all kinds of free resources, honestly, just around our cities and across the state. Just so many, just free things that we could do. A lot of time in the nature, at parks and things like that. And so that was sort of my early childhood education. And then I would say the one negative thing is because my parents took a traditional approach early on. I didn't love reading because it was sort of forced upon me. And so it wasn't later on in life until I grew a love for reading. And so I think that would be the one thing that we see now in our own children as unschoolers. We're finding that they, because we've never forced them to learn how to read, they actually are doing it on their own and love it. And so we'll get into that later. But as a kid, I spent a ton of time outdoors, was given so much freedom, just to explore the woods. We grew up close to the Appalachian Trail in the Blue Ridge Mountains, and I would just spend hours exploring the woods with my dog, just alone, and so I was given a lot of time just to explore nature, and I grew a love for building things and started just building tree houses and forts in the woods. And the man who built our home that we were living in was still building more homes in our neighborhood. And so I would walk to the construction sites and ask him if I could take any scrap wood, scrap nails, and he'd give me whole buckets of bent nails that I would, bend back as straight as I could. And I would take all the scrap wood and I would haul it back into our woods and build these tree houses. And so I'd interact with a lot of the construction workers, learned a lot of things that way. And it was just a ton of fun. And then that sort of turned into just my love for outdoors, turned into really a landscaping job early on. I don't know, maybe age 12 or so. I was mowing my parents' yard, and then realized in exchange for doing yard work for my parents, they would allow me to use their equipment, and I would go ask neighbors if I could do things for them. And so I started mowing different neighbors' yards and getting paid to do that. And I would I'd do it with excellence as best as I could. And then that turned into other jobs. They'd hire me to redo landscaping, laying mulch, and big summer projects, and really turned into a job as a teenager. And that was one thing that was cool about our unschooling experience as a teenager, preteen and teenager. I think was really probably my unschooling years. Was that I never worked a regular job, really because I didn't want to. But I found ways to make money just by pursuing my own interests, building things, and working with my hands, working outdoors, and it was just a really cool experience. So, I would separate my story into sort of three parts that we'll go through. The first one was just time outdoors was a big part of my life and my upbringing. Secondly, was a love for travel. As I already mentioned, our family's travel turned in just a love for the world, and what a cool experience to see the world and get perspective of other cultures and languages, and that turned into a love for East Africa, and spent several summers. I remember as a 16-year-old kid spending a summer in East Africa alone, living with some friends, going on a safari, and actually filmed a documentary, which I'll get into now. Another part of my unschooling years was a love for graphic design and film, which really, because of my freedom that my parents gave me to pursue my passions, it really developed into who I am today. I had a love for computers and art. I love drawing. And I kind of merged those two together and began doing some graphic design stuff, just figuring different programs out on the computer, and actually began doing graphic design for like small businesses and churches and different things in our community. And again, it was another way that I was earning some money as a teenager. I began experimenting with film with my parents' camcorder. And found some bootleg software that I would install on my parents' computer on our little desktop, and figured out how to edit videos. Of course, in those days, before smartphones and all these apps, editing was difficult, and I had to learn really some major software to be able to edit our own videos, and I had to just figure all this stuff out because I was given the time to figure it out. Having to figure out how to get footage from my parents' mini DV camcorder to the desktop computer. I had to save up my money and buy the cable that was needed, but then we didn't have the port in the desktop, and so I had to go to the electronics store and buy the port hardware, and then had to figure out how to install that, how to open up the desktop computer and install the port so that I could plug in the cords, so that I could transfer the footage, and figure out how to edit my own videos. and I just loved just experimenting with those things, again, because I had the time and the freedom to pursue my passions. And really quickly, that grew just a love for filmmaking. And it ended up me just like doing different videos with my friends and editing them and figuring out different special effects. One thing that I did, I think the beginning of my love for reading started with comic books. And so I'm reading all these comic books with my buddies, and then we decided, hey, let's make a superhero movie. And so we spent a whole summer writing out the script, storyboarding. Reading comic books kind of taught me how to storyboard, and we wrote out a whole script and storyboard and figured out how we were going to make this feature-length film, an hour-and-a-half long film on this superhero movie. And so as a young teenager, I think I was 15 or 16, we traveled all over the city filming this movie, and we got all of our friends and even different adults that would volunteer as actors, and I would talk with different connections with even some real estate agents that gave us access to different properties that we could use for the film, and it was just a ton of fun. Learned so much just trying to figure this thing out on my own, and spent an entire year making this movie, and then did a big release. Once we had it edited, I bought a DVD burner, and so I made all these copies of our movie, and so we had all the cast there. We had made all of our own costumes. We even figured out our own budget for the film, and it was so much fun. So we had this big release night at the youth center, and used their big projector and invited tons of people, but a lot of our homeschool friends. We were involved in a homeschool co-op, and so we invited a lot of our friends, and their family came. And what was really cool about that night at that premiere was that actually a local independent filmmaker came out, because his kids were homeschooled and were connected with our friends, and so they came to the premiere. And I remember after the movie was over, he approached me and said, "Hey, let's have lunch." And so he and I had lunch together the next day, and he was super impressed by, one, just taking on the challenge of making a feature-length film for my first film, and that turned into a really cool relationship, which is, I think, a big part of unschooling, being able to have sort of a mentorship, apprenticeship relationship. And this guy, this local independent filmmaker, became really a mentor of mine, and taught me a lot about filmmaking, even allowed me to borrow some of his professional equipment. And so I started making short films, just on my own time, making different films and music videos. That turned into a few jobs where I would film either weddings and edit and make wedding DVDs, became a videographer for different events, different like local bands. I'd do their music videos. Again, my mentor allowing me to borrow his video equipment. And then I came across this really cool opportunity. The C-SPAN News Network was doing a student film contest. And so me and my buddy made a short documentary and submitted it to the film contest, the C-SPAN film contest. And we spent, maybe a month or so shooting it. It was like a political documentary. We did a lot of different interviews with different political figures in our city. Again, I think I'm age 16 or 17 at the time, and setting up interviews and using this professional equipment, and then submitted the documentary, and we won second place. Won $5,000, which I was able to use that money to buy my own equipment, and it was just such a cool opportunity. Our documentary ended up airing nationwide multiple times. It continued to fuel my love for really self-teaching graphic design and filmmaking. Of course, having this mentor of mine helping along the way, and it was just so cool to have those opportunities. Again, because my parents had really released me to pursue my own passions. Began preparing for college, and I wanted to go into a mass communications program, and so prepared on my own for college. At age 16, I began my parents gave me the option to begin taking some classes at our community college, and which gave me some really cool classroom experience, my first time in a real classroom. And it went really, really well. Got a lot of my general education stuff out of the way, because I knew when I went off to college, I did not want to worry about the gen ed, like the regular classes, right? I just wanted to focus on my major, wanted to focus on filmmaking. I really wanted to pour all my time and passion into that. And so I wanted to get all my general education stuff out of the way. Another cool thing, in addition to attending this community college and taking classes that would actually give me college credit and transfer to the university I wanted to go to, our city at the education department also offered what's called CLEP tests, where you could test out of a college level class with a single test and actually get the college credit. So like your basic like English 101, English and college algebra and different things like that. I began registering for these tests, and you can buy the study book, the CLEP test book, and I would study these books just as much as I could for weeks, and then go to take the test. I would take the test and test out of that subject. And so I didn't even have to take the actual class, right? You get college credit. So another just example of sort of that just self-motivation, self-teaching, and taking control of my own learning, knowing what I wanted to pursue and then taking the steps to do it. And so when I entered college at age 18, went off to university, I think I entered as like a second semester sophomore, almost a junior, had finished most of my general education stuff by age 18. And not because I was super smart, but just because I was motivated. And so when I went to college, then I was able to pursue my passion with all of my time. And so entered the mass communications department, and got connected with the film teacher there. Again, I was kind of seeking out my own mentor, and met with the head of the film department at our university, and asked if I could just help him with anything, volunteer my time. And so he would do like different commercials and things for some local companies in addition to working at the university. And so he had me edit some of his raw footage, and he sat there with me and watched me edit the footage, and he was so impressed by my speed and ability to edit this raw footage down and produce this commercial that he wanted. Ended up hiring me as his work study, and so I was working under him. He hired me to teach his video editing course and his film practicum course. I volunteered to work for the school newspaper, in addition to working for the school TV station. Became the TV station manager, producing a weekly news broadcast, and then we would on the TV station we would air different student films and different things. But was managing the TV station, also volunteering for the newspaper and learning like layout and continuing learning graphic design on my own time. And then really my love for graphic design really flourished when I got an unpaid internship at a local production company that hired me in my senior year at university. And I got to work on several different major projects that they were doing, a commercial for Verizon Wireless and for Black & Decker tools. And I ended up doing a lot of the graphic design elements for the commercial. And they taught me a ton about graphic design. And so it was then that I began doing my own sort of freelancing. So I'm still doing like wedding videos and shooting like promotional videos for different small companies, and now adding to my portfolio graphic design and website design. And so I think, as I look back on my story, my unschooling story, I see a lot of because of the time and freedom given to me, as I pursued my passions, I think it fed into my self-motivation. I don't think I was just innately self-motivated, but I think that the time that I was given to pursue my passions fueled that, and I became just determined, self-motivated to learn the things that I wanted to do, and so then right out of university, was able to land a full-time job as their communications director. And when I went in for the interview before graduating, I went in for this interview, and it wasn't the college degree they were looking for, it was the experience, right? And what was so cool, and I'm really wanting you to catch this point, is, I've heard the argument that a lot of people, they want to hire based on experience, so you can't get an entry-level job because you have no experience, but you can't get any experience because they won't hire you, and so it's just kind of that cyclical, catch-22. Well, what's so incredible about unschooling is that as an unschooled teenager, I had a ton of experience because I was given the freedom to do it. And so I was able to land this full-time job, not because of my education, but because of the experience that I had. And so I think that's a big part, of unschooling as a teenager, is the ability to pursue that passion and to gain the experience needed to get the jobs, rather than focusing solely on it's got to be the degree. And so I'm thankful for the degree that I got in mass communications, Bachelor of Arts degree, but it's not been the main thing that's supported my life. It's been the experience obtained in those early years that built this passion. And so, that's my story in a nutshell. And I'm super thankful for my parents and the upbringing that I was able to receive, and the opportunities that I had, just because mostly due to the time and freedom given to me. So I hope that helps as you think through, I think, some of the big objections to unschooling, or at least the concerns that people have, is the later years. How will my kids be prepared for college? Will they be prepared for the real world? And I can say without a doubt, I was prepared for the real world because I was thrown into the real world as a teenager, having to pursue, as I pursued my passions, also had to accept the responsibility to do all those things.
So as a child growing up, my dad was a pilot, and we moved pretty frequently because of that. And so we hopped from school to school to school, and eventually settled in a small town that actually had a huge homeschool community. Things were not going well for me in public school at the time. There's lots of stories that we could go into that, but eventually, even though we had never heard about homeschooling before, we just felt like this was the community for us. And so my parents decided to pull my sister and I out of school. I was in 5th grade at the time, and this began my homeschooling/unschooling journey. What I love about my unschooling story is really seeing my mom's story unfold as well. So as we began homeschooling, this kind of, what, in my point of view, or in my perspective, really opened her up to this love of lifelong learning. And as she began to study with us, her passion just exploded, and she began exploring things from ancient history to simple machines to etiquette class, and on and on. You could just see her passions begin to flourish. And this was such a great example for me. And then that really started spilling over into other areas of her life. She began picking up odd jobs, like she started working for Pampered Chef. And then she would invite us to join her. We would help with the parties. We would help with all of the little food creations. And then she would even invite us to join her in the finances and the taxes and all of the little forms she had to fill out and the deductions and all of that. And that was just such a cool part of our journey, was to see her flourish, which in turn, as she fell in love with learning, it allowed her to release us to follow our passions as well. We were very privileged to be able to grow up with a dad who was a pilot. And because he was a commercial pilot, he was able to let us fly what we call standby. And so we would take all sorts of trips and journeys. We were able to have some more freedom to travel and to really take things more hands-on in life. And so we had family in Colorado and Montana, and we would frequently go to visit them. What I loved about those trips are things like time on the farm, working with my grandfather, learning about horses, tractors, snowmobiles, all sorts of stuff, actually getting in there with him to fix those things and to care for the animals and whatnot. And then in Montana, I was exposed to rodeos, and there was one time my cousin was just like, "Hey, you want to do a rodeo?" And I'm like, "Okay." So he trained me for like a day, and I was able to go out and join the rodeo for that evening. My dad, when he had his time off, would take me on trips, and we would travel the rivers, and he would show me how to camp and to fish and to explore. And he would be like, "We're going here," and he'd pick a random place, and maybe we'd go explore Williamsburg or head off to Monticello or even fly to another state. And we just had that freedom to explore things hands-on, and it really awakened a passion in me for history and just adventure. And so that was just a sweet little memory that I had specifically with my dad. So as my story continues, a lot of it includes some really random, like, odd jobs and stuff. I started odd jobs at a really young age. I took a course in babysitting and CPR at 10 years old. And from that point on, was able to actually pick up several babysitting jobs, which then turned into some nannying and even some payroll positions at like daycare centers and churches and whatnot. But I also just did some random work around the neighborhood with our neighbors, washing cars, mowing lawns, you name it, whatever they needed, I went after it. And if there was something that I needed to raise money for, I would just go for whatever random job might pop up. This instilled so much confidence and freedom, and of course just being around a plethora of people, you're always learning something new. Other things that I dove into was I randomly found a position at the local mall to be the Easter Bunny one year. I think I was 14 years old, and that was quite a funny part of my history as well. But I just loved having the freedom to be able to pursue anything that came my way. Like, I was that, like, say yes to everything. And it just was a piece to the puzzle getting plugged in the whole way. As I began to transition into my older years, I really had a passion for sports. It began with soccer at a younger age, just doing the recreation in our area. And then at about age 15, we had a homeschool group come together and build a sports program. At first, they started with volleyball, and I had never ever touched a volleyball in my life. I was into soccer. I wasn't super happy about it. I was like, why can't they just do soccer? Can we just start with that? But all they had at the time was volleyball. But I love sports so much that I was like, okay, well, I got to try it, Well, that summer, I picked up the ball for the first time. One of our mentors actually played volleyball himself, and so he came and kind of helped me that summer figure things out. And as soon as I touched the ball and began playing around with it, it just ignited something in me that I didn't even know was there. So as I was saying yes to everything, you can imagine that my schedule would be a little bit crazy, but it was a crazy that I chose, and I said yes to everything that I was learning to love. So an example of my schedule looked something like this. I would wake up at about 4:30 in the morning and head off to work. And I was about 16 years old when this schedule started. Head off to work. I was a lifeguard at a local gym, and so I would spend those first few hours in the morning lifeguarding. Then I'd get ready to go at the gym, head off to the community college to take a few classes, go back to the gym to get my weightlifting and workout in, head off to the local co-op where I taught 2 different physical education classes there. I took 2 other classes at the co-op that I was interested in, and then I would head off to soccer practice, basketball practice, and then volleyball practice. So in between, we had all this stuff like social activities, babysitting, just hanging out with my boyfriend, who is my husband. And then he and I actually gathered community together to have these random events. Oftentimes it was getting teenagers together from the community to just go hang out and do stuff. And the stories that my husband and I have together as we grew, and the privilege that we had to just say yes and go and pursue our passions. Wow, did this develop a love for lifelong learning in us. So that's another fun story for me, is that when I was in high school taking classes at the community college, there was some phys ed classes that I had taken, and the professors actually came to me after the semester was over and asked if I would help teach the next several semesters. So there was a couple times when I was able to teach a volleyball class or even a tennis class, and that really fueled my already love for training, coaching, and teaching, and then heading into university, being able to utilize that more and more. So if I were to put my volleyball career into a timeline, it would look something like this. At age 15, I touched the ball for the very first time and fell in love. From there, you would not see me without a volleyball. And I began to pursue other mentors, coaches, camps, clinics. In my passion for that, I was introduced to Junior Olympic volleyball and more coaches and training. Through that journey, I developed a love to share what I had with others, and actually began making a career out of it myself by starting my own camps and clinics and then even coaching younger teams, starting with the JV team in our own homeschool program. And then even the local Junior Olympic team, I began traveling and coaching with that at a young age as well. And then as income came in from that, I was able to put it right back into my passion. And I pursued the best camps and clinics in the area, learned from the coaching staff at UNC, began shadowing other coaches and in that field that were really advanced coaches. And I was so thankful that they took me under their wing. And as that grew and I got more and more exposure through Junior Olympics, travel teams, the local outdoor volleyball tournaments and whatnot, I was able to be introduced to more and more collegiate coaches and staff. I was able to then join a program, a Division I volleyball program that was just about an hour and a half away from where I grew up. And that began my college journey as a student athlete. Things that I learned as a student athlete, obviously a lot of discipline. We had, so as crazy as my schedule was in high school, that only grew as a Division I student athlete, having to learn to balance study hours, classes, time on the road as you're playing and traveling, being able to communicate with professors as you're gone like half a semester, and still being able to try to keep up with those classes, which that was something that I really loved. I am not like super studious. I am driven and I do have a passion to want to do my best. So knowing that I'm not like this book smart, brainy person, I learned to have a relationship with my professors in a way that they could help me in my shortfalls and help fill in gaps for me to be able to succeed. And so it was really my drive that pushed me to become a good student in college. So during my time as a student athlete, I actually fell ill with a chronic illness and just couldn't get to the point where I could play and practice consistently. And so during that time, the coaching staff and I got together, and as sad and as difficult as it was, to come to the conclusion that I could no longer play, this was not the end of my story. The staff and I got together and they offered to allow me to come on the coaching staff as a student assistant. And so from there, my learning only continued to grow, and I transitioned from an athlete then to a coach and trainer full-time. And what an opportunity that was to serve on a Division I coaching staff. At the same time, I still continued to pursue coaching at the high school level and also at the travel level. Here I was in college pursuing a bachelor in education and coaching, at the same time actually already in my profession, which was kind of an amazing thing to balance in my life, being in my profession already and then also pursuing that the accreditation through my bachelor's as well. So what did all of this amount to? Obviously, I loved that I was living life. I didn't have to wait to get out of school to figure out who I was or what I wanted to do in life. I was given the freedom to say yes and be who I was right then and there.
And as I think back on our stories and where it's brought us to today, I think one of the things that unschooling provided for us was, of course, it cultivated in us that love for lifelong learning and that self-discipline and self-motivation that grew in us, and the experience gained in our respective fields of passion. And I think all of that amounted to careers that really kind of built themselves. Like, we didn't have to do the resume and interview circuit. Like a lot of the jobs that came our way, a lot of them actually ended up pursuing us, or we just created our own jobs. And have created our own living. All right, so I know that was a lot, but we hope it was encouraging to hear our story and helps you walk away from this session with some confidence, knowing that as you lay that foundation of lifelong learning for your children early on, they will be able to learn and adapt and thrive during those teenage years as they direct their own learning and pursue their own passions. And we want you to know that, we haven't arrived still today, that we're still growing, we're still learning.
Failing forward.
We're failing forward. We faced a lot of obstacles in our lifetime, but we know how to adapt. We know how to roll with the punches and to learn through those things. And really we've been able to thrive no matter what kind of comes our way. And I don't want you to hear our story and think like we're not prideful of any of that. We realize the gift that it has been to be on this journey. And we're very thankful, very grateful for the upbringing that we've received, and we want to pass that on to our own children, to another generation, and we hope to multiply that through you all as well.
Yeah, we would love to see more people have the same opportunities that we were given, and we do count it a privilege every step of the way, through our parents' stories, through us, through our children, and every opportunity that we've been given. We really want to have a heart of gratitude in all of that.
All right, so we're excited for the next session, session 3. We're going to walk through our 10 foundational principles of unschooling. So we'll see you there.